Myself and Littyyy Bro Flacko. Unfortunately, Littyyy Bro Flacko was unable to be here today, so I will rush through his introductionary stuff as he would want me to do in his honor not being here. And he would be a little more dramatic and elaborate. It is what it is, and it is great to have you here with us, Mr. Robbin Markx. But he would introduce you, hype you up in a lot more detail than I have. I just know you're doing real well on TikTok, and you seem to know a lot of good stuff. So I'm looking forward to this. And then he would say a little bit the history, how we all got started together on the show. And it has to do with the fact that he put out his Littyyy Bros project, the volume 1, last year. It was doing the promo run, but it had been mixed by the local guy Marco Miyagi, somebody who I know just through the Facebook life of being in the local Montreal scene. And then he shares the track. I hear it. This leads to a little bit of an album review. He sees my album review and he likes what I do with it. And this leads to us having an interview. He said something about how he felt it was a therapeutic experience, and he was surprised upon how much nobody asked him questions of the same vein upon how I approach it. And then something about, I think you're muted. Or
No, I'm good. I'm good. I was
okay,
talking
no
to my kids.
oh, no worries. That's definitely a professional Zoom parent right there. But and then basically we started doing this show because he liked the experience, and we've been running it since about end of December. And with that, we like to kind of get it off started. If you could just kind of introduce yourself a little bit briefly, tell us a little bit who you are, where you come from, and where your parents come from is how we start
Yep.
this.
Yep. So my name is Robbin Markx. I was born in Brooklyn, New York, and my parents are both from the West Indies. My mother is of African descent. My father is of Chinese descent, but they both were born and raised in Trinidad and Tobago in the Caribbean.
So that's dope. So you're
Yeah.
from Brooklyn, and that's super relevant for the proper opening question. Because as much as you might be the coach these days, once upon a time you was the musician guy, and we do like to walk through the whole journey of people here. And the opening question is a little bit of a story. And when it lands, you can kind of take it in whatever direction it makes the most sense. It starts with my girlfriend, and she's washing the dishes. And she's playing that Black Eyed Peas song on her phone, the I Got a Feeling. Ooh. She's vibing, she's dancing, she's doing her thing. And I'm looking at her, and I'm like, when the fuck did this become dishes music? Like, she's doing chores. Like, when did this song become this, right? Because if you think about this track, right, like, this song is like a vibe back in the day. Run it back 10 years. We all super drunk in the clubs, dancing around, doing our thing. 10 years goes by. The song does not change at all because it's a song. But we change so much that the context evolves that now it's like you're running, you're going to the gym, you're doing some chores, you're cleaning up, you're doing something kind of boring, and you throw on that song to kind of bring you back to happier times. And I'm like, say a word, that's a wild epiphany. Because then I started thinking about the little ones, the 20-year-olds running around doing their partying now. And I'm like, they have no idea that they're going to grow up and effectively be us doing dishes one day to that Cardi B whatnot. And then I realized we're doing dishes to Cardi B. It's just what it is, club music.
We do dishes to everything.
But it's just that. It's like it all turns into like chores music and stuff to bring us to the best of times almost. And so with that, it kind of like made me think about musical journeys and the way that interviews happen and the way that people talk about it. And you'll find most people almost bring it back to like this adolescent age, right? Where people are like, finding their identity. I discovered hip hop at this point. I started writing poetry when I'm 12. And so it's like all like in the middle of the story somewhere, right? If you think about music, it's kind of like one of those things that's always around us, like to the point where like when you popped out the womb in a hospital type thing, there was probably a song playing that you were absorbing in that environment. And so I realized that we don't really start the story right when we do tell our stories. Like I can think about being 4 or 5 years old. My parents got like these gray boxes in the room, the amp, the fucking tape deck, the radio, all the wires going together out to all these speakers. My dad would bust his Led Zeppelin tapes and things like that. And at nighttime, it would be Montreal club music coming straight from the live environments over there. My mom's was more into like discos and musicals and soft rock on the radios and things like that. And all of these different sounds and locations each had their own environment, and they all kind of contributed greatly towards the kind of experiences that I would go on to have later on in my life, especially with regards to my own musical journey. So I was hoping, Mr. Robbin Markx, you could bring us back to being the youngest Robbin Markx that you can remember, and walk us through a little bit what it sounded like to be you before you had any real control over the sounds in your world.
No, that's a really great question, and I can appreciate the way you kind of set it up and framed it for me. I would say that I have pretty good knowledge of like my childhood. I remember a lot. I can remember as small as 2 and 3 years old. I have memories. You know, they're little pockets. You know, I don't remember every single day, but there's certain events that occurred that I can go back to, and I can like smell the air and taste the food. You know what I'm saying? So for the music, it's the same way. My moms and my pops, I'll start with my pops. My pops wasn't the most musical guy. He wasn't like, hey, put on my song. You know, he drove cab for many years, and in the car with him when I was a kid, I would like sit in the passenger side with him, and he would listen to really like you know, solid gold oldies type music, like 50s music. So I was listening to that kind of stuff, Buddy Holly, you know, those kind of jams. And my mom's, on the other hand, she was a music head. She was like, you would hear calypso music, traditional Trinidadian music, calypso running in our house, reggae music pumping in our house. Also, she was super duper Americanized. So my mom, she was a elementary school dropout. You know what I'm saying? My mother didn't have a full education. She dropped out of school, I think in the 4th or 5th grade, got pregnant when she was like 13 or 14 years old, had her first child, had a really rough start to her life. Fast forward to when I was a baby, my mother had moved to America and become a small business owner and started doing people's hair out of her apartment at first. And then because the business became successful and she started to build an audience that really gravitated towards her, she wasn't the best hairdresser, but she had a really good personality. You know what I'm saying? She ended up opening a brick and mortar beauty parlor that operated for many years, ended up buying a house in New York City, you know what I'm saying, from a girl from the islands who had a 4th grade education. So she was super Americanized, and she would like pull up Whitney Houston, Michael Jackson. Like, she was a fanatic about Michael Jackson. Me and my brother had the jackets, the beater jackets. Like, he had the red one, I had the black one. I was mad because I didn't have the red one. You know what I'm saying? And you know, so in my house, like all of those musical elements at the time, I didn't know that that's what would kind of guide me towards my mission in life. You know what I'm saying? But at the time, I just remember it being a really pleasant, upbeat, and fun environment to grow up in.
And when you were like young, were you like into singing and dancing and kind of being charismatic? Because usually the people who say Michael Jackson tend to go hard on that Michael Jackson fandom
Yeah.
when they're little.
Yeah. So for me, my older brother was that. I was not at that age. I was really shy. And I think it had a lot to do with the fact that my brother, very much like my mom's, had a very, very, you know, big personality. He was one of the more popular kids in our neighborhood. We would have birthday parties and people would all show up for him. I would have birthday parties. They would all show up for him. So it was like, it didn't matter what was happening. It was more about my brother than it was about me. And I think because of that, I kind of hid in his shadow when I was really small. So I wasn't really, you know, outspoken or wanting to perform. I was really shy. It wasn't until my, I would say, middle school and then high school years where I kind of went into that.
That's fair. So I guess because we don't have as much time as normal, I would say we could jump ahead into those like high school years. What like made you kind of go down that path of getting involved in music? And you're still in Brooklyn at this time?
No. I actually relocated to Atlanta, Georgia last year in October.
No, I
So
mean like
we're
back
new.
then when you were younger.
Oh yeah. I grew up, born and raised in Brooklyn, lived there. I did live in Manhattan for a couple of months, you know, for my 2nd grade year. But for my elementary school days were all in New York City. And then when I was in middle school, going into high school, my father remarried and we moved down south to North Carolina.
Oh, so during the high school period, you're down in so you go down to South Carolina. No, sorry,
North Carolina.
North Carolina.
Yeah, North Carolina. Yep. And down there is when I really got serious about rap. Before then, you know, I was writing rhymes when I was in middle school. You know what I'm saying? Like, that was something that kind of came with the turf, being a kid growing up in, you know, the late 80s, early 90s. Like, everybody was about some rap stuff. And then when I got in high school, it's like everyone had to kind of like pick a lane. Like, were you going to be an athlete? Were you going to really lock in on your books? you know, were you gonna, you know, be a troublemaker? And it was kind of a lane that wasn't filled, and it was like the rapper. And I was like, oh, I want to be the rapper of the school. Like that's my thing. So even then, I feel like I had an idea of finding a niche for myself that maybe wasn't saturated, finding a lane that, you know, a whole lot of other people weren't doing, so I could essentially try to be the best in that lane. You know what I'm saying?
Right. So how do you like get into rapping as a middle school person in North Carolina? Like, is it just you start like spitting bars? Do you have like opportunities to perform at school? Like, how do you actually manifest this?
Yep. So for me, again, when I was 9, I started writing rhymes. So I was in the 3rd grade in New York City is my first impression of hip hop. And God rest his dead, Biz Markie and Big Daddy Kane were shooting a video in the back of my friend's apartment building. And I was spending the night at his house. And we were looking out the window the whole night. We stayed up until like 2, 3 in the morning, just looking at them, yelling at them, trying to get them to look back. And that was my first real like up close and personal encounter with hip hop. And from there, I knew that I wanted to start rapping. And Big Daddy Kane was my guy. He spelled his name, and I was like, the BIGDDYKANE. Like, what? Like, how did he say that? How did he do that? I want to do that, you know. And my name became Robbie D. You know what I'm saying? So I started doing like, my name is Robbie D, and the place to be at 9 years old. And then fast forward to North Carolina. I was again, I had went back into my shell because I was in a new place, and down there at the time there wasn't much diversity. So I was really like an anomaly essentially. I was like, people didn't know, are you white? Are you black? Like, what's happening with you? Why do you look like that? And what table are you sitting at? You know what I'm saying? And at that time, it was really black and white. It wasn't like any Hispanic people. It wasn't any Asian people. It wasn't any mixed people there. You know what I'm saying? People who are biracial. There was none of that happening. You know what I'm saying? So that because of that, I kind of closed myself in and kind of really dived into like my creativity. So I would write stories, I would write rhymes, and then my you know, my cousin moved to live with us. My cousin through marriage. His name is Injai, aka Juzik. He's on a bunch of my records with me. And when he moved down there, it kind of gave me like some support. And I was like, okay, so now I can get a little more open about what I'm doing in terms of my rhymes and stuff. So I would share with him. He started rapping and writing because I was doing it. And by the time we were 15 or 16, we started doing small little shows in North Carolina.
Say word. And you like, where were these at, like bars and whatnot? And you would just like sneak in, or?
No, they were like showcases. You know, our main big show was at a place. I want to say it was Peppers or one of these clubs, like at that time. But it was like a daytime event, family
Okay,
friendly kind
okay.
of event, and they had some showcases. It was like 5 people in the crowd. Half of them was our family, you know. But we got on stage, and it was a moment. And then from there it was just kind of like me knowing when, you know, my classmates were applying for colleges. I was like sending my record label to or my demo tape to record labels. You know what I'm saying? So like that was my focus. I wasn't like, okay, so I got
So
to go to
how did you go
UNC.
about recording?
I would record on a karaoke machine in my crib. So we had like a little karaoke machine, 2 tapes. Anybody who's really, really old school knows that we used to do this. We would take one tape and play it, and the other one we would record. So the beat would be on one tape, the other one would be recording it. The sound quality was horrible. You know, it was not good at all, but we had a mic, we had a way to create, and we believed that our bars were so good that we would like get a record deal. So we was sitting in the crib, you know, this is me when I was in the 11th, 12th grade. All I was doing was focused on, you know, getting a record deal. Mind you, I was still focused on my studies. I was like not giving up on school. I was very much an academic. I had really good grades, principals list, honors, honor roll. But towards the end, especially in my senior year, I kind of tapered off a bit because my mother passed away my senior year of high school, and that kind of sent me into a downward spiral, if you will. And I kind of got off track in terms of my academics, but the focus of being a professional rapper was still very much a target.